just get comfortable here. Man, I said I got Gamecast. I can't afford it.
I got Gamecast.
Okay.
I just, when you said that, I thought of Dennis, like, I haven't even begun to peak.
I haven't even begun to peak now.
Yeah. I did not go as super lunatic with the notes this time. I tried to take more worthwhile notes, like things that I definitely wanted to bring up.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess let's just lunge into it. Let's go for it.
All right, so we are
talking our second round of the deep dive on Dark.
Yes, we are.
The great German series of recent history.
Like sands
through the hourglass.
The God Particle.
Have you heard of this other series on Apple TV called Dark Matter?
Oh, yeah. Someone told me about this the other day. They were like, have you seen Dark Matter? And I was like, no. I was like, do you mean Dark? Or what do you
It's an extreme ripoff of, it's an American ripoff of Dark.
You think? Okay. I didn't really pay attention to the plot when they were saying it, but when they just said the name Dark Matter, I was like, I don't know. It sounds like Dark.
I became loosely aware of it, and then I started talking to other people who watch that show, and I'm like, man, this is like, even the visual style of it is like, it's like concrete rooms with like yellow and navy blue clothing. I'm like, that's Dark. That's what Dark is.
Yeah. So it's okay. So it's one of those. Well, maybe have to see, but yes.
No, yeah, I'll probably check it out at some point, but
okay,
and judge that accurately without flying off the handle. But yeah, as we move into the second season, with the cliffhanger of the first, we find out again, spoilers. I don't want to jump into it. If you've made it this far, you've either watched the show or you don't care about watching the show.
You either have watched the show or you're like me, and if you're like me and you are invulnerable to spoilers. Or prefer them.
I don't know about invulnerable. Yeah.
Yes.
Blasphemy.
No. No. Or are you?
I'm
the
just pushing buttons.
Am I?
No, it's your bull.
Am I? No, it's got to be your bull. Am I, Patrick? Or am I so sane that you're driving me up a wall? No. But yes, okay. So you were saying,
now that we've alerted to the spoilers, the first season lets off with the earth-shattering revelation that the stranger that we meet in the first season and are pondering about the entire time we're watching the show, we're thinking maybe it's Mikkel, maybe it's somebody from the future we haven't met yet. We don't know. Speculating and speculating and speculating. We find out that it's Jonas, and that's our first solid nugget of figuring out this crazy web of insanity that we get for Ironclad fact, because a lot of it is speculation and shadow and mystery and mystique up until that point. And now we have our first like really ironclad, like we have Mikkel as like the first drop in the bucket, and we get a couple little things of like figuring out how it all weaves together. But now that we know that Jonas is continuing on to the future, and we know for a fact that he gets trapped in the year 2052 for an unforeseen amount of time, we start to see how this is all starting to weave. And I find it very interesting, the set deck, the costuming, the visual language that's created in inverting the colors that theme Jonas. In the early part of the first episode, we see him navigating the landscape in a war-torn 2052 Winden after the events of we learn about this apocalypse that is coming to Winden that in the normal timeline we're exposed to has not happened yet. But his colors of yellow and blue are inverted to the jacket that he's wearing, and the face mask that he's using are the interiors are yellow, kind of symbolic of his personality, kind of shifting and evolving and changing. He's becoming more of the sullen personality of the stranger that we experience later on. The time that he's been away, this time jump that we're experiencing has definitely started to take its toll. And I don't know if I mentioned that, but the second season takes place an odd 6 or 7 months after the events of the first season, so we're jumping forward in time a bit here. Now, this is going off the span of, in relativity to the characters' perspective, their entire lives. In some cases, that becomes very short periods on the actual timeline for various reasons, but it becomes a very tangled, crazy web of genealogy. Well,
yeah, and of the genealogy, correct me here if I'm wrong, but I think we did say this in the
We did.
The first, like, there are like the 4 main families, correct?
Yeah. There's the Doppler family, the Nielsen's, the Tiedemann family, the Conwald family, which the Conwald family is loose. It's not really. As we peel back that onion, we realize that there's not really much holding that family as a unit.
I don't know why, but sometimes when I say that, like the 4 family, I think of The Office, where it's like, was it the 5 families of the
5 families
park or whatever?
Yeah. Going after that Godfather reference.
Yes.
And kind of The Sopranos, but yeah. So there's this interwoven web of these 4 families amongst this fictional town of Winden. One of the big inter-season speculations, I didn't mention this last week because I didn't want to like spur a whole thing, but there was a lot of speculation in the year and a half-ish time between season 1 and season 2's release. A lot of people thought that because Noah was taking Bartaj under his wing and kind of guiding him, people were thinking, is Bartaj and Noah the same person?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of rumor and speculation. There was a lot of things in the show that nudged towards that being possibly true. But the beautiful thing right out of the gate, season 2, they know that was what fans were thinking and pondering on. They squashed that right out of the gate. They show... I believe it's 1921, 21-ish.
1921, yes.
They go back to the era of Sigmundus actually operating and functioning, and we see an unidentified man with a tattoo on his front, exactly like Noah's that he has on his back, and he's with a young boy carving out the tunnel that is the main mode of transportation through time in the first season. And in this early scene, it's revealed to us that young boy is, in fact, the younger version of Noah. We still don't have any clear understanding of directly where he comes from or who he comes from more specifically, but it is, in fact, not Bartaj that grows up to become Noah, as we're somewhat led to believe in that first season. And Noah kills this unknown man after they have a discussion about an unknown character up to this point that they're referring to as Adam, which becomes largely the focus of this season. Adam, it's pretty much all about Adam.
Well, and I think
who he is.
The name Adam, that has to be. They have to be doing the biblical reference there. No.
Well, the other thing too is that's also kind of a speculation spurring thing, because me personally, I went through the entirety of the second season watching, thinking, oh, well, this whole thing goes back to the origin of time, like the origin of the human race. This entire knot encompasses all of humanity. And I was like, if that's how this ends, that's wild.
Yeah.
Even though that didn't turn out to be the case. But I do think that the writers had a very sadistic sense of humor in toying with their audience. And I actually, it's part of what I love about the show. Like the whole thing with Waller's eye, especially.
Wait a minute.
So Waller is the one detective in the police station.
Is that the one?
He's the first time we see him in the show. He has a
he's not the
blood-soaked bandage.
Is he from 86?
He's in the 2019 timeline.
2019.
He's one of the detectives investigating the kidnappings.
Okay.
And we see him in all throughout the first season. He has a bandage under his eye. In the second season, he has that one block set of sunglasses covering up his nasty eye.
Okay.
So, and then like they keep poking and prodding, being like, oh, how did this happen? And then we meet the detective Clausen in the second season, who's brought in to kind of stranglehold this investigation of the kidnappings, because now on top of Eric Obendorf, Mikkel being missing, we now have Ulrich is missing, Jonas is missing, Yazin is missing, and Helga Doppler are missing. So there's a lot more focus and attention on this spanning outside of the borders of Winden. And a lot of eyes are on the police department for them to try and figure out what the hell's happening and get this right, because it's become pretty much an epidemic in this town of kidnappings. Hannah comes to the 50s under the preconceived alias of Katarina Nielsen. She steals Katarina's name so that, for a number of reasons, that she would be accepted in to visit Ulrich if she was able to locate him. And it's a kind of a dig. You get the feel that it's a dig at Katarina. And she eventually decides to stay in the 50s. She decides she doesn't want to come back after she stole the time machine from Jonas to get there in the first place. So Hannah is definitely one of the more untrustworthy characters in the series, as we put forward in that first episode. And, there's the utter tragedy of Ulrich being trapped in prison for 33 years, wrongfully accused of the child murders. Because we've been so brain-trained by causal determinism at this point, once we see and recognize that it's him in the prison, we know that there's no getting him out of that. That's just his fate, as it's entrapped in this eternal spinning web of chaos.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, it is true. This a little bit of a sidebar here.
Yeah.
The fact that, something like this is going on, you get disappearing people just die. You even look back to the first season of Mikkel, who's hanging himself.
Mikkel/Michael Conwald.
Yes.
Mikkel Nielsen, Michael Conwald. It gets a little confusing, but he's one of the more simple things in the series.
Yeah.
He just gets lost 33 years before he's supposed to be alive.
I can remember a sociology experiment we did back in school, and it was like, okay, 100,000 people around you have died. Describe to me what's happened.
Yeah.
And a lot of us went like hardcore, like apocalyptic end of the world type stuff. And
yeah.
And the point that the professor was trying to get to us, long story short, was that this happens like all the time, like not much changes in the world.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting how, like, how you always say to yourself, like when you're watching a show, depending on how they react to it, people go missing and pass away all the time. So the fact that all these abductions are happening, or missing people going, in this one town, I can somewhat buy that it doesn't get a field day with the press type deal.
Well, also like how Clausen introduces himself. I mean, he references the elephant paradox of, if 10 or so people see an elephant from 10 different angles, they'll come up with 10 different theories about how to explain what an elephant looks like. But if one same person looks at all the 10 of those perspectives, they'll give you a full, complete picture.
Uh-huh.
So it's like there's a lot of interesting philosophical like phrases and terminologies that are brought up in the series. Like, for example, each cycle starts with a quote. And a lot of the episodes in the first season start with various quotes. Mm-hmm. But this particular season starts off with the Nietzsche quote, "If you stare into the abyss also stares into
back.
you."
Yeah.
And it kind of brings about that dark psychology that is at play, especially with the character of Adam. And I guess we might as well just get into it in episode 4 and this is like the biggest spoiler for the entire show.
Oh my God.
Watch out. But
y'all better watch out. Ghost. Go ahead.
But so Adam is also, in fact, actually Jonas at the age of 80. And we got the famous line from Adam, which was also the same line from Stranger to Jonas in season 1 in German, "Ich bin du," which translates to "I am you."
Which, yes, I'm just, okay, let me just say this. When that happened, I was like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. I didn't know how to necessarily react. And I'm almost
it's the first like brain-breaking moment, I think, in the series. Like everything else is kind of like, okay, I'm on this ride. But then that's like, wait, what?
Well, this is one that like, even now still like thinking about it, I think I get a grasp on how it could be him, or how it could be him, but it is him. But like, like I'm trying to work through it logically in my head. Like, okay, so, but if he's there at this time, like that's one thing that I do still have a little trouble with, is like,
well, this third season gives a lot of the context for how that's possible in terms of how he evolves as a character to get to that point. But you kind of factor in, it's like, that's a lot of time and a lot of, especially on the crazy ride that Jonas goes on through the course of the series, there is a lot of time for him to evolve to that point.
True.
Like 33 years is a long time. That's like the bulk of how long I've been alive. Like, so I like to think I've evolved quite a lot as a person from in that period of time.
No.
You're like, I can actually vouch against that.
Because I have not. No.
Yeah. But it is interesting, and I think that fact is one of the main driving forces of intrigue in the series for me personally, because you're now dealing with a character that is both the protagonist and the antagonist of the course, which is a fascinating
it is
realm to
extremely
play
fascinating. Just from if I just break this down and just as a writing standpoint, just strictly just look at it that way, it's a dangerous gambit, I gotta say, because if you don't do it right, it can come off silly if you don't do it correctly.
Yeah.
But it is also intriguing. It's one of those ideas where, like, when you first get it, you're like, oh, that's awesome. But then it's, I think, in the execution, a lot of writing ways in the execution of, the idea could be good or bad, but if the execution isn't good, then it doesn't matter.
Well, that also lies in where I believe, one of the things I believe about the series is that the real enemy and antagonist of the whole course of this story is not necessarily any one of the characters, but it's just the raw nature of ignorance, arrogance to control this timeline and thinking that you know everything that's going to happen, and also lies and deception.
Yeah.
How that whole soup of stupidity kind of pools into this terrible
almost
about
as
of
if,
it.
Almost as if, like, much like how Jonas is both, like you just put eloquently, the protagonist and the antagonist.
Yeah.
It sort of makes it that conflict, that inner conflict you get with characters. Oh, see, this is why it's so hard to talk about, because, like, I'm going. It's a tough one. And I'm like wrapping around it.
Why do you think I feared this one for so long? Because it is a difficult one to discuss.
Well, like, you always want to have that internal conflict of the character struggling with themselves.
It's making that internal conflict external, which is interesting.
It almost makes that, so cheesy, I'm going to say, that darkness that everyone has within them is the main.
But I mean,
like
that is what the show is getting at.
Yeah.
And also, just like to talk for a second about the genius of the title, like, the title covers so many different things because it's A, dark matter, B, the darkness within the characters themselves, dark situations. Like, it really covers, like, the ground of what the show is getting at, which is what you aim to do as a writer. Like,
it does. No, I will say, when we talked about ludonarrative dissonance, oh my God. Sorry, I didn't sleep well. Having that quality of, art, you want to make sure that everything's there for a reason, that it has its place, or everything's coming together. I will say Dark, as many pieces as they got going on, I can't argue tonally, thematically, that they hit the nail on the head with it.
Yeah. And it's going back to other episodes that you can kind of see where my head's been at doing the time travel episode, the heroes and villains. It's like my head has been in this one for a while. For sure. But like, so much happens in this season, and a lot of, like, drops. And we talked also about the writers playing with fans' expectations, almost toying with it like a cat. We get Alexander's real name in this season. It's actually Boris Niewald. I believe it's briefly seen on his passport in the first season, but it's not really like, maybe if you were pausing it. I
honestly don't know.
Speculation. No. But the speculation between first, second, third seasons for Boris Niewald was that his last name was seemingly a combination of Nielsen and Conwald. And a lot of people believe that he was somehow tied to the knot externally.
Yeah, okay.
And so there was a lot of red herrings like that for people, like, really going through the show with a fine-tooth comb. And that's the kind of stuff that I like. For people who are, like, deeply analytical, you're just playing with them. There's some kind of delightfully up about that.
You're just like, I'm gonna
play with this audience here a little bit. Clausen is an interesting character as well, because I don't remember if we find out. I'm gonna have to look this up, but I can't remember if we find out who gives him the letter that is the driving force behind him going after Boris Alexander, because he's looking for his brother. And we find out that Boris Alexander is the one who actually killed his brother and assumed his identity to enter Winden and escape his crimes from previous life.
Yeah.
And he takes over the power plant through a course of events, falls in love with Regina, et cetera, et cetera. And two, I have also mentioned, as you go through the series, or once you finish the series, there is that, from season 3, that family tree that appears on the floor, intertwined, showing exactly, definitively, where all the pieces of this puzzle lie through genealogy. And it's interesting to actually sit down and, like, break it down, because it is a brain bender, for sure. But there's a lot to it, and I definitely encourage, independent research research on that front because it's, as we've said, a very deeply researchable topic.
I mean, there's just so much going on.
It's almost impossible during the first viewing to wrap your head around it entirely, but it is a good one.
Well, and two, thinking about that Nietzsche quote that you had.
Yes.
There is sort of, you look at like, going back to like the themes and all that. I don't know why I'm kind of just putting this together now a little bit in my head. Not that I'm a Nietzsche expert by any stretch of the imagination.
No. Nobody is.
How you have like the Sigmundist group and they're almost, I don't know, is it right to say that they're like waging a war against what they think is God or something?
They're essentially waging a war on their own timeline, trying to stranglehold it into what they believe.
Yeah. It's just the way like the show, like I get it, and this is just maybe my interpretation, is that God and time are the same thing, that time is God.
That's basically what they believe, yeah.
Okay. And I think that's interesting, with the Nietzsche quote, he talks about in some of his works how what he called the Ubermensch, the Superman, has the ability to, I'm going to butcher this, but like just what we were talking about before with like that darkness in everyone, that even though even if it took a bunch of things, even horrible things, for one event to happen, as long as that one event is happy, then that made it all worth it, I think, essentially is what I'm trying to get at. I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. Like I'm going more about like towards the end of the season, right? End of the season with Jonas and
alternate Martha.
Yes, alternate Martha. This is going to be the whole episode of just trailing off, trying to make sense.
You trail off, my friend. This is a whole show of trailing off. But yeah, as just to give some bullet points, some of the major like important things, and try and orient some of this, because I know like one of the things I've been asked is like, where do all these puzzle pieces connect? Because there's a lot going on. And like a lot of people aren't going back through and rewatching the show, which I actually heavily advocate for if you have the time to do so. Some of the puzzle pieces that are dropped is the big one is after after Jonas is sent back by Adam to the day before his father's suicide, because the whole thing is that they've only been able to travel in 33-year increments and not really get around these events.
Yeah.
Adam has a time machine which is capable of dropping into any moment in time. And he sends after Jonas travels back to 1921 and is trapped for, again, he goes back 99 years from 2052 all the way back to 1921, which is kind of like the opposite of what he wanted to do. He's just at the opposite end of the spectrum of trapped.
Yeah.
And he finds himself in Adam, and Adam explains a lot of the history of what he's going to be going into, and he is then sent forward in time from 1921 to the day before his father's suicide. And this is a whole season of bootstrap paradoxes.
Yeah. Well, essentially he's saying that if he can stop the father's suicide, he can essentially
unravel
the knot. That's like a linchpin almost, right?
From his perspective, that's the first thing that happens to unsettle everything. But it's like that bootstrap mentality. It's like, well, when everything is a round circle, is there even a beginning? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, where's the beginning and where's the end, if at all?
From any one perspective, anything could be technically the beginning when you're in it. So it's maddening from that perspective.
Yeah.
But he goes back to try and stop his father and actually ends up causing it inadvertently, because his father had no inkling of killing himself whatsoever. But then he makes Michael very avidly aware of the fact that if he doesn't do that, his son technically won't exist.
Yeah.
Because he won't have the same course of events happen to him, leading to Michael being sent back in time, resulting in Jonas being born. So he's essentially, from his perspective, saving his son's life by killing himself, which honestly is a very weirdly noble thing.
No, yeah, there is a tragic honor, beauty, however you want to put it, in that.
Yeah.
As horrible as that is.
And in this same conversation with Jonas and Michael the day before his suicide, we find out that it was in fact Jonas who took Mikkel through the cave. He didn't just accidentally find his way through the cave as we were led to believe. It was actually Jonas going to that point in time once again and moving Mikkel through, having had the preconceived knowledge of how to get through the tunnel and take him there, he's once again reassuring this timeline's outcome and making sure that this knot continues to exist. There was another thing that we didn't mention from season 1 that I did want to bring up, and like a lot of people have asked me, well, why didn't Michael like raise these concerns with the police and like to have somebody else try and help him go back to his natural timeline? You have to keep in mind that Enos was actually drugging him.
Yeah.
And for a large portion of his youth, he actually believed that the early portion of his life was a dream because she was basically Munchausen syndroming him.
Yes.
So,
but that is that is a fair point to bring up. Like, why didn't he?
Yeah,
I mean,
because that's just because that's one that I've had a lot of people ask me about. And it's kind of layered in there real thin. If you're not paying attention to it, it could be easily missed that she's swiping sleeping pills and various drugs from the hospital and actually drugging Mikkel as he's a child. Yeah. And it's not up until like the point where he's an adult, around the time where young Mikkel is coming of age to the point where he's sent back, where he starts remembering things avidly and is acutely aware. Like he's of that it's not just like a dream scenario or something that he imagined, that it is actually, he actually did travel back in time. And by time that he's acutely aware of it, he's really not in a position to do anything about it. And it's stated in that sequence with Jonas where he goes back and says, I'm starting to remember things more vividly. And there's lines along that course of thought that he explains that he is starting to remember now, but there's nothing really he can do about it. And that's why I think that's also why he takes such action to continue the timeline the way it was, because he sees an avenue to reinforce and have a positive change on the world around him where he has been otherwise lost in a sea of darkness.
Yeah.
To go around too, we get little drops of Silja in the future. She helps Jonas get back to 1921, even though they don't know that that's where he's going, just to get him out. He knows he's not supposed to be in this.
When we say Jonas, let's just, for clarification, we are talking about protagonist.
We were talking about 16-year-old Jonas.
16-year-old Jonas, yes. Just to keep, because I need to tell myself that just to keep my head on straight sometimes.
Yeah, it is tricky. But also, to get into the various bootstrap paradoxes that occur, one of the interesting ones is the gun. There's actually only one pistol that is seen through this entire series, really. Like one pistol of consequence, really.
Yeah.
And it's the same P-22, I believe. It's the same gun that James Bond carries in the 60s. But it's all the same pistol. It's the one that Boris brings into Winden from his crimes that he commits. And the one that Hannah then steals from him in the 80s and keeps up until 2019. She's about to kill herself when stranger age Jonas walks in and stops her and tells her all about time travel. Same pistol that Noah in 1921 is killed with by Agnes. So it's just kind of weaving through this whole timeline. It's the only pistol that actually exists. And it's funny because Noah walks in to kill Adam with that pistol, and then Agnes walks in with the same pistol from a different timeline.
You talk about taking the Chekhov's gun theory to a new height.
Quite literally.
Yeah. Well, that's also too, it's like, here we're going to go, like, there's so many things here that I don't even know if they were thinking it when they were making it, but just like philosophy and scientific and theology things that go on that you can't
and even storytelling trope things.
Yeah. Like, one of the things I always thought was like interesting from Greek philosophy is I think it was Plato, or maybe it was Aristotle. It was one of those guys, or maybe it was Socrates. It was a Greek guy.
It was some Greek guy.
It was a Greek dude, and he had this notion of the realm. He called it the realm of the forms. Like, there's essentially, if you look at like a chair is usually the common example given. There's like a chair, but then somewhere in like an alternate higher level of existence, there exists the form of that chair, the true version of it. And that you talking here about the gun makes me think, a little bit about that kind of thing is, are the true versions of the characters and like something like the gun, their forms, you could argue they don't even exist within these this cyclical timeline that's happening.
Yeah, it could be argued for sure. Another point that I wanted to bring up was the entire sequence of the lake the same day as Michael's suicide.
Yes.
Jonas, age 16 and a half-ish, roughly, like partially future Jonas, who's like been trapped in he's trapped in the future, post all these little things, but he's not quite the stranger yet. He goes back and he's only about 6 months older, or he's a year to the day older than himself at this particular point in time. Mm-hmm. And he goes and kind of snoops at himself a year in the past from this point on the beach with Martha and his friends. And at this point, there was a growing attraction between him and Martha, but has not really materialized into anything yet, and doesn't actually between the two of them specifically. But we get a social bootstrap paradox here but before we get into that, there's the pendant that they find on the shore right after Bartosz tells the story of the mythical dead woman at the bottom of the Winden Lake, which is
a bone chilling story for me. I don't know. There's something about stories like that are always just like, I don't know. It's like water.
But I bring it up because it comes back up in the following season. So we'll bring that up in the next episode. Okay. But that's also tied to the pendant, which is another example of the writers screwing with their audience, which I'll explain next season. But I think that those are worth
like if someone's never like seen this, they're just like, I don't know, this sounds like this show. They're just trying to piss me off. They're just screwing with me the whole time.
But it's from an analytical perspective, it's fun because it's like you think you have it figured out, you think you have it cracked, and then it just takes a hard turn in the other direction.
This is a treasure hunt of a show, almost
to the most crazy degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the scene with Jonas, he leaves, says that he has to go help Grandma Enos with the new tablet that they got her, and that he would see Martha at the party later. And then the 1 year older Jonas, who has some very harsh life experience, and he's definitely been darkened by time, comes in and sees an opportunity to have what he wants that he hasn't been able to have. And it's just this really dark thing where he's his literal own worst enemy, and he basically steals his own girl.
Yes.
He goes in and he makes a move on younger Martha, despite the fact that he's not supposed to be there.
Yep.
And that wasn't supposed to happen. And it's funny because he says certain romantic like phrases to Martha that she then brings up to him in a later scene that he thinks is being said the first time.
Yes.
But she's really just reiterating it from his older self. Said. So it becomes like that certain romantic line becomes a bootstrap paradox in and of itself, and their whole relationship kind of becomes a bootstrap paradox.
Paradoxes within paradoxes. Define for me what a bootstrap paradox is.
So it's like we described last week and in our time travel episode. It's when like the book Journey Through Time is brought back to Tannhaus, and then he reads it and then finds out he wrote it. So it's like, who wrote the book?
Originally,
because
yes. Okay.
So like that information just kind of transcends the person who initially created it, because it's kind of going in this loop of time of like, well, Jonas heard Martha say that to him when he was younger, but it was really his older self that said it to her. So it's like, where did it originate? Because each one of them only heard it from the other one at different points in time.
Bogey Lowenstein said I cheated on a test once.
But yeah, it's brain bendy.
This is definitely brain bendy. I mean that in a way of like, you have to give your attention to it. This is not one.
Yes.
I mean, obviously
it's not one you can kind of passively watch. You kind of really got to dig into it. I mean, you're either in it or you aren't in it.
Well, you can have it on in the background if you want, I guess, just to have it on. You can do that for anything. I mean,
when you've seen it as many times as I have.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. But this is one that you do have to, especially the first time you watch it, you do have to kind of, I mean, especially the second cycle, season 2, there were a bunch of times I had to go back and, like, it took me a while to get through it a little bit because I had to go back and make sure that
there were times I rewatched episodes.
I was understanding what they were doing and saying.
Yeah.
And watching it, I was watching it with the subtitles in German.
Yeah.
So it took me a little bit. I wanted to make sure I caught all the details. I know I didn't, but
Yeah, it's a lot. And like I said, there's benefits to listening to the native German and watching the subtitles, or there's also benefits to watching the subtitles and listening to the dubbed English. So I think that there's benefits to both. I don't know which to tell everybody to watch first, but I like seeing the performances from the original performances from the actors, but I also like getting the additional layer of context of the dubs. I mean, it's 6 of 1 really. And then, like I said, the pendant becomes relevant later. They reference the fact that it's the patron saint of travelers. I think it's Saint Christopher, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah,
patron saint of travelers.
that whole sequence, and then later at the party, the party is kind of like the last moment of happiness for this entire group from Winden. We get to see everybody like fully like joyous and like not fully darkened by time as we see them several months later. Like obviously with Michael's death, that contributes to that, and then the missing children, everything happens and really brings down the mood of the town, as it were. But we get to see the first instance of Ulrich going down the avenue of cheating on Katerina, and we get to see obviously Michael. It's the last time this is literally the last time anybody will have seen him as everybody leaves the Conwald home to go over to the party. Just various things, and then also we find out this interesting piece of Martha and Jonas's story, that they actually hooked up, and that it's not just like this like wavering attraction that they have in the first season. It's like there's a backstory here that we didn't know previous to this.
Oh yes, yes. I think I know where you're going.
And
with this.
It's alluded to quite often throughout the initial portion of the second season. Before we get to this point, they show that dream sequence of Jonas and Martha constantly hooking up, but it's not really hit on the head up until this point that actually happened. It's interesting because like their relationship is deeper than we initially assumed it to be. It wasn't just like they had the wavering kiss here and there in the first season. That wasn't the first thing that happened for them. It wasn't a wavering attraction up to that point. They actually have a history, and it's all predicated on that year future Jonas coming back in and screwing with it.
So yeah, so does that sort of allude that, or is it at least I'm just saying from like a writing standpoint?
Yeah.
I say that too much, but is that sort of a way to say it's got to be for like as an audience member as you're watching it, that's got to be something to say, oh, maybe this time it will be different, you know?
Well, that's the whole conundrum of these first 2 seasons and 3 to a large extent.
Yeah.
A lot of these characters believe that there's like this next time, and granted, I'm getting ahead of myself, and that the ending of the series really does prove that. It's like from a certain perspective, that's also kind of not true. Like you can see how there's an ignorance there.
Yeah,
that it's like you're all just perpetuating the same series of events.
Yeah, and you can't. Obviously, you're so close to it, you can't see it.
And that as me as a viewer going through it the first time, watching each of these seasons, you know, I'm thinking, oh, these characters are just hyper ignorant of how they're causing this fatalism. They're keeping up this causal determinism that this is all centered around, and they're keeping these events going for the sake of staying in it. Yeah. When all they would have to do is just like stop. But then we also find out, you know, this is again getting ahead of myself, but there is this fatalism that if one of them tried to just break the sequence of events and off themselves, there would be some kind of intervention that the gun would clog. Or we see that actually just very subtly when Noah tries to kill Adam, the gun won't fire because Adam is around after that to influence these sequences of events,
which is so strange. Like it's always
it's
weird.
Not like it already happened theory. It's,
it's like it already happened, so it can't happen again. So it's like, oh, like do you ever like have that where like I get this sometimes in day-to-day life, and just because I'm friggin' weird, but like you ever like when you're driving and like you're like late, you know, and you have to kind of do like a rolling stop through a stop sign, you know?
Yeah.
And this happens to me a lot where I'm like, not a lot because I'm not ever late anywhere. I'm always on time.
I don't believe that. I know for a fact that ain't true.
But as I'm driving, I'll like, you know, if I'm late, I'm trying to like get there fast. I'm trying to make up some time, which I never do. But you get to the stop sign and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go through this quick. And then there's a car coming. So I have to like fully come to a stop and wait. And I sometimes always say to myself, the amount of things that I could have changed, like if I would have put my shoes on faster or put my shoes on later, or brushed my teeth a second time, or didn't take as long in the bathroom taking a dump. Like, just I don't
That's
know.
exactly how I feel about the car accident I got a few weeks ago. Like, if I was only, if I had left 5 minutes later, I wouldn't have been in that situation.
That's like so weird to me. Is it's like, I know it's just a car passing me, but like all the things that had to happen for me and this stranger in this other car to meet at that exact moment and point.
Yeah, it's
It's
weird.
it's weird. It's just a weird. I know it's dumb to think about that, but I'm like,
that's the kind of I think about all the time.
Yeah, but I think that's what Dark sometimes is getting at, I think.
Yeah. To a degree, yeah. To jump ahead to, like, I have a good bit of stuff I wanted to get into.
Yes, go ahead.
The interesting real world connections to a lot of things that happen, especially in this second season.
Mm-hmm.
The timeline, I didn't even mention, the timeline of this second season is building towards an apocalypse that we become aware of is going to happen.
Yes.
On June 27th, 2020.
Yes. Which
is about the time we were already in COVID.
Yeah, I know. How about that?
And this show predates COVID by a considerable amount. It was written as a 3-season structure before they ever went to air.
Yeah.
And this second season aired a year before COVID. And they're talking about the world, quote unquote, ending around the time that COVID occurs. As an audience member who was already enthralled with the show, watching the world kind of end around the same time that they're saying it's going to, I was like, this show knows everything. It's in it. This is my everywhere. New Bible. But I'm not like it. But it was kind of nuts, especially Jonas going around in the future wearing a face mask. It was like there were some really crazy, eerie similarities to COVID that were freaked me out. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I was
not equipped to handle it.
Yeah, I didn't watch this. Obviously, I didn't watch this during that time period.
Yeah, I was watching it as like each season was dropping. I'm watching this in real time as it's connecting to, current events. It was vastly surreal to say the least. I get like a lot of people say, why are you so enthralled with the show? I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Personally.
Just
because it was matching up so much like with things at the time.
The word apocalypse, I know we all think of like destruction and, end of the world type stuff when you say that word. Mm-hmm. But what I think is interesting is I believe, I'm just going off of what I learned in school. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry to people out there.
Oh, you referring to that guy that came at you on YouTube?
Yeah, I was like, okay, anyway. Yes. I believe it from like the Greek word, which literally means to like pull the lid off something.
Yeah.
And it just means like a revelation, like a revealing of something that was hidden or like you couldn't get at one point or another. Until now, you can finally get at it.
Interesting.
So it never really truly meant like the end. It just meant the revealing of something that was hidden. Yeah. I always felt that was interesting because I think that plays a little bit into Dark too, the way they set it up. Whether or not they knew that, I don't know, but maybe I'm going way too far into it here. But continue.
You're preaching to the choir, my friend. Going way too far into Dark is my forte. I guess
to take that with no context. Going way into Dark is my forte.
It's my forte, my man. So many things happen in this second season. For instance, the Triquetra notebook, which is
such
a deep. It's a deep thread throughout this entire series. We see Noah with the book. He brings it up, and then it's mentioned in the course of his interactions with Claudia. He actually kills Claudia, but she says this is a game you still don't know how to play. Mm-hmm. Implying that she's already been through all the events that he's fighting against, and there's like all kinds of weird layers to that. But there's been pages missing from the Triquetra notebook.
What a name, too.
Yeah.
I love that.
The Sigmundus group have been going off of that book as a basic Bible written about Winden and all these intricate weavings of time travel. They're going off of it and basically reworking it into the real world as kind of a Bible. And there's pages missing, implying that there's a lack of context that Sigmundus has. There's certain missing pieces to the puzzle that they are not aware of. And that adds a very interesting layer once you wrap that around. Like I said before, there's that ignorance of events that is the real enemy.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. And then Noah finds several of these missing pages on Claudia's person when he kills her. And he then figures out the context of his daughter and his wife. Yeah. So Noah now knows this, but we as an audience don't have the full understanding of what changes him as a character. Like, he's no longer this evil, sadistic piece of shit because he now knows what happened to his daughter. And as we'll get into that in the following episode, but it just gets very interesting because he then goes and he meets with Charlotte, who we now find out is Noah's daughter. And we also see that Egon and Claudia's deaths have a lot of interesting parallels. They both are witness to each other's deceased bodies in the wake of each other's deaths. Claudia bears a lot of responsibility for Egon's death, but there's all these visual parallels back and forth to a lot of these different occurrences, and it sells forward how while we may feel a lot of distance between each other, there are a lot of parallels in each other's lives. Also there's parallels between Egon and Regina, his granddaughter. They both come down with cancer. We get a lot more information about Agnes in this season, understanding a little bit more about who she is. We found out that she is Tronti's mother, so therefore Ulrich's grandmother. But we don't know a lot about where she comes from or what her deal is, at least at this point. And we find out that she is in league with Claudia, and she's kind of put in this middle ground between dealing with Adam, and she's part of Sigmundus. Not really clear how she's involved, but we do learn that she is Noah's sister. So we're starting to get little pieces of information, learning more and more about how all this is tying together. And she also becomes aware of Claudia's demise, and Claudia informs her not to interfere. And Claudia knows that this is going to happen to her, which is very interesting. And it deals with the missing pages from the Triquetra notebook, and Noah then finds them. And he learns a critical piece of information that we don't learn until the very end of the season. And the Claudia from the 80s, who is in charge of the power plant, eventually goes forward in time and learns, after acquiring the time machine from her older self, she goes forward in time and learns a vast wealth of knowledge about the unfolding of events that occurs in the years since she finds out that she has been missing. And she learns about Regina's illness with cancer, and the death of her father, Egon, to which she goes back and tries to prevent and ultimately ends up causing, as we find out. But yeah, there's the various number of things that spurs into place, and Claudia feels that she needs to stranglehold and control this timeline, much like Adam. And we find that, I didn't mention in the previous season that she actually, her dog that went missing from her youth, from her older self, who took it and brought it to her slightly younger self. It's a lot, this show. And in the last episode, we find out, I won't get too heavy into this, but we find out that the woman running the society in the town of Winden in 52 is Elizabeth, Charlotte's daughter.
Yeah.
So we get a bit of context for how this timeline is all kind of interweaving and coming together.
Well, yeah, it's like, so Noah is Charlotte's father, and yes. Elizabeth, correct?
I did check this out here. It is actually in that final episode of the second season. It's kind of softly revealed to us up until that point, especially in the early part of that last episode of the second season. But it is, in fact, Charlotte is the daughter of Elizabeth, just as Elizabeth is the daughter of Charlotte. So they're each other's mothers, which is the most mind-bending bootstrap paradox you can. How is that possible? It's brain bendy, to say the least, of anything of this show. I mean, it definitely like stretches the capability of understanding genealogy in terms of this stuff. Like, it's taking the Back to the Future moments of like going back and messing with time travel and like the possible, crazy implications of that to the absolute nth degree of actually living out your entire family history through the course of an entangled knot. I mean, it's the more you go down the spiral, the crazier it gets, for sure. Yeah. Young Noah shows up in the last episode moments before the apocalypse is about to hit. He hands stranger-aged Jonas a letter from Martha, which is like, we haven't seen Martha in the future. We don't know what becomes of her, so it's very strange. We're like, oh, this is the first instance we're seeing something from Martha far afield. And then not long after this, Martha is killed by Adam. He walks in and just shoots her in front of young 16-and-a-half-year-old Jonas. And he states that he will feel that pain for the rest of his life, and we're left pondering why the hell Jonas would do that to himself and to Martha. Like, well, that's kind of where, in terms of that storyline, where we're left off into the unknown for that year wait into that third season.
Yeah.
If you're watching it the first time.
I mean, it's a cliffhanger if there ever is one.
Yeah. And then mere moments after Adam walks out the front door, Martha reappears with bangs and says that she's from another world. And she whisks him away to what she states is another world. And it's kind of a similar cliffhanger to Jonas being trapped in the future in the first season, but it's a little more wildly holy. Because from a time travel philosophy perspective, up until this point, we've been dealing with the causal determinism loop entirely.
Yep.
And now we're going, oh, there's a multiverse on top of this causally deterministic loop. Which seemingly suggests that causal determinism and the multiverse are not necessarily mutually exclusive, which is a very interesting idea.
Which I still don't know if I get that. And we're closer to where I am now. Yeah. So explain this to me like I was 2 years old.
Explain it to me like I was 5.
Pretend I never studied.
You never studied.
No.
So like we said in the time travel episode.
Yeah.
It's causal determinism is that idea. It's like that it already happened theory.
Yeah.
You say you go back in time to change something, but you don't have to really change it because your mere presence there and the events that unfold from you being there cause the event that you're going back to try and alter and change. So it's actually always been the way that it is that you're going back and trying to alter, and nothing you do is going to change it because that's how it happened.
Yeah.
That's causal determinism.
Yes.
The multiverse is the idea that there's this infinite number of universes out there where every decision and every thing, every version, every type of thing that could happen, there's a whole universe there that exists wrapped around that central idea. And these branch timeline. This is a whole topic for getting into next week's episode.
Yeah.
But
a little bit, just wet your whistle here.
We'll wet the whistle. And it's, multiverses branch timelines. You go back, you change something. Say you cross this barrier between worlds and affect, something in the other world. That creates a branch timeline where things split off and fray into all these different things. So that's multiverse theory, where it's like that's Avengers Endgame. That's Deadpool. The fracturing of timelines is what the multiverse is. And it's like taking a serrated knife to a rope and fraying it, and then you get all these little tiny ropes that shoot out. That's the multiverse.
Here's how I kind of look at it, or at least what I try to see. The causal determinism is much more rigid or mechanical.
Yeah. And it's fatalistic, it's tragedy, there's no changing anything. You're the cause of it all in the first place. And that's causal determinism.
The multiverse is more of an organic or evolutionary thing. Just because I see
the multiverse is kind of a forest, whereas the causal determinism is a flower. I guess it's the weirdest way I can describe it.
Okay. Yes.
That made no sense. Nobody got that. That's fine.
Keep that in.
Just keep that in your head. One other interesting thing to bring up, looking at that last shot that we see, it's the exterior of the Conwald home about to be hit by the wave of this quote-unquote apocalypse. Mm-hmm. We see the flash of light indicating that alternate world Martha and Jonas have traveled. Yeah. A literal split second before the house is hit by the burst that's supposed to kill them. So that is important, especially for the trailers, for certain things that occur in the third season. Yeah. But that leaves us in a very interesting place. And still, we have a much more broad understanding of how this web, and as they describe it in this series, not exists to tie the genealogy and these family histories weaving throughout history, looped in on themselves in various ways. There's a lot to all that, but we have a better understanding of it after the second season and seeing a lot more how these characters have tried to manipulate things, but also only deeper infused what they're actually trying to change into reality. Yeah. And it's very interesting. Clausen goes to try and stop this by opening the canisters that were put into the power plant, because he has Boris Alexander basically pinned to a wall. He knows that he killed his brother. He's just trying to get the final proof of it. But he actually is the one who ultimately causes the apocalypse by opening the canister and releasing the God particle into the power plant. And that results in all of them dying except for Charlotte, who goes through the created wormhole from this and is now in the trapped future with the older version of her daughter, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I'm trying to squeeze in here at the last second, but this season is meaty. For 8 episodes, it does twice as much as the first season's 10 episodes did.
And like you said, he pulls the lid off the canister, or he opens the canister, I guess.
Yeah.
Pulling the lid off of something. The original term of the word. Sorry.
He's deep in it. He's deep in it. I'm converting Han
knee deep
into darkism. He's deep in the dark. But yeah, it's a good show. Good show. I think I barely scratched the surface with what I can get into here, but hopefully I've kind of helped everybody understand. Like, if you were left like confused by a lot of this stuff, my goal is to try and help everybody untangle the web a little bit and have it make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
So hopefully I achieved that goal at least a little bit here. If you want to get into more of like the research of it, this second season is just bootstrap paradox after bootstrap paradox.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the keystone to this season. Just learning how many weird little tiny loops are being created. And this core timeline, as we get into the third season, there's more. But these first 2 seasons and this first world that we experience is really just all kinds of bootstrap paradoxes resulting in this large causal deterministic web.
Mm-hmm. It is trippy.
It's trippy to say the least, and it'll bend your brain into a pretzel, which is a fun place to be, I guess.
Maybe for you.
You're just totally mad at me that I made you go on this journey.
Oh yes, that's fair. That's accurate.
I did like your description last week that it's a time traveling soap opera. I feel that's
and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Beautiful description.
Soap operas, get like a bad rap.
But the difference between this though is this is a 3-act structure with a finite ending, where soap operas just go and go and go and go.
Yeah.
So that's the difference in there for me. Like, this is the most interesting soap opera of all time because it has an actual ending. Mm-hmm. So that being said, I enjoyed a lot, obviously. Curious what your thoughts are. How did you enjoy the second season?
I think I honestly, after having this discussion, I kind of like it a little bit more. Kind of want to go back and watch it more again now.
Yeah.
Because when I first watched it, I still kind of preferred the first season, only because
the mystery aspect of
it. And I still am like, this one almost has more of the, if you want to put the adventure aspect going on.
Exactly. This is, the first season is like a veiled mystery.
Yeah.
The second season just like yoinks the veil straight up.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is what all of this is. Like,
yeah. So I enjoyed that aspect of it, but I would get, like I said, I would get lost a lot.
Yeah.
And I would have to like make sure I was keeping everything straight. But having this discussion makes me want to go back now and watch it again, because I'm like, oh, okay, that's what was going on there. And then but I first have to finish the whole thing.
The third. So. Yeah. And if you, honest to God, if you're walking away with that feeling, I feel like I've done my job in these first 2 episodes here. So.
Or were you the cause of it the whole time?
Or did I just want that to be the case? Yeah. So if you haven't at this point, definitely go check out the show. Definitely a golden gem, in my personal opinion.
Yep.
One for mystery fans, one for... It's the kind of show that really, like you said, it kind of has everything. It has the mystery, it has the drama, it has the science fiction in spades, and it has this like crazy spanning series of love stories.
Yeah.
The score, the cinematography, the writing, for God's sake... It's got so much to offer. If any of those things interest you, I highly recommend it.
Yep.
We'll see you guys next time to wrap this all up with season 3. Season 3 is the brain breaker, so prepare yourselves. So
it's going hard.
I know Han's going to hate me after that one, so we'll see how that goes. But I am going to do my due diligence. That's the one that I have people ask me about the most, so we'll see you all for that one. That was the worst outro I've ever done.
Keep this as the outro. Do this.
Just do that. Just do what you're doing.
Just do what you're
keep
doing.
doing.
Do what you're doing. No, that's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. No, it's terrible. I'm tired too. Okay. I'm a human being with limitations. I can only do so much.
I should have wore the vest.
Should have wore the vest.